Hi, this is C.S. Sujata. In today's Crack the Code series, we are going to understand various accounting aspects relating to Resident Welfare Association. The Resident Welfare Association has gone through a lot of changes in the recent times by adapting the best practices and also evolving in the days to adapt to the digital world. So when you see the accounting, it has gone through tremendous change in the recent times, and also it is integrating with the various other best practices. So in the next 20 to 30 minutes, I will take you through the various aspects that the Resident Welfare Association has to follow when they are doing the bookkeeping and their accounting practices, and also what are the best practices which they can adapt for improvising it, and also what are the future trend, how it can be done in a better way by the associations which are not following the practices that are in existence, right? Now, first, let us understand what are the objective of bookkeeping or accounting. The basic objective of accounting is that in terms of a resident welfare association is the first and foremost is transparency, because as the association itself is driven by the concept of mutuality, because same set of people, same like-minded people come together for a common objective. What is a common objective is basically the upkeep of apartment maintenance and keeping that in good condition by pooling money from the residents. So it is not a profit entity. There is no commercial intent or profit motive is the intent of the association. That being the case, every member wants to ensure that there is transparency is maintained in bookkeeping. So the transparency becomes the foundation for bookkeeping when it comes to resident welfare associations, because it's being the common money, nobody wants to be blamed or becomes accountable for any kind of misfeasance. So when it comes to integrity, the second thing comes to integrity, because some of the associations, resident welfare associations, are accounts are handled internally, either by their own office bearers or relying on their own members. 2 or 3 key members volunteer to do the bookkeeping services. So because of that, it requires even more transparency, and integrity is needs to be maintained. So that's also one of the important objective we have to keep in mind when it comes to bookkeeping. Then the third aspect is that outsourced. Once the accounts are outsourced to the third party, it is the responsibility of the management to ensure that proper records are given to the third party, that is the accountant, so that the bookkeeping happens in the way it is expected. The third aspect comes the control. When it comes to the control, there should be some maker-checker concept. Though it may be a small association or a larger association, but still the treasurer becomes the key person. He is the person responsible for keeping books of accounts. And the president, secretary are the 3 major role players when it comes to the custody of books of accounts or maintenance of books of accounts. So they have to ensure that the maker checker concept is followed whenever there is a payment or receipt or any kind of major expenses, whether it is capital expenditure or any major decision making comes into play. Fourth concept is that timely reporting. The association is driven by the bylaws. So the bylaw stipulates when the books of accounts are to be closed, when the AGM needs to be conducted. Typically in any resident welfare association, it is 6 months from the end of the closure of financial year. So it happens before 30th of September. Unless and until the books of accounts are completed and given to the auditors for auditing, it is not possible for the management to conduct the AGM within the stipulated time. So the first step is the closure of books of accounts in a timely manner. Then The last but not the least is the statutory compliances. Depending on the size of the organization, depending on the collection, the receipts, and the number other services rendered by the association, the compliances also increases. Say, for example, if there are about 2,000 units is the size of the apartment, obviously there will be one common clubhouse and party hall, and other amenities will be provided by the builder. In such case, the apartment also provides various services in terms of renting of the stalls or organizes events, various other activities. So because of that, the other incomes, say sponsorship services and renting of spaces and renting of function hall, these are the other services the association renders. So when it comes to statutory compliances, because of rendering the other services and the size of the apartment and the luxury or the what should I say, it depending on the size of the apartment and the maintenance charges they pay, whether it is below 7,500 or above 7,500, the GST applicability and the other income related services also come into play. So this is the basic objective of keeping the books of accounts in a timely manner and complying with the various statutory guidelines. Now let us understand what are the best practices that needs to be followed by a resident welfare association. When it comes to the best practices, we can bifurcate into 3 baskets. One is the bookkeeping, where the basic entry level of accounting is done. The second is the systems of accounting, like what are the practices that are followed by the accounts division in consultation with the management, with support of the management. Third, the preparation of financial statements. So when it comes to the first item, bookkeeping, first and foremost is that depending on the size of the organization and number of office bearers in the management pool, every association has to have standard operating practices. What is the standard operating practices is that it should be documented how the process of accounting needs to be carried out in the books of accounts. In the sense, say for example, if they are engaging an external trainer for yoga services, what are the application forms or what is the empanelment process for selection of the yoga trainer? What are the forms he has to fill up? How it has to be submitted to the association or estate office? From there, what are the approval needs to be taken? How much of money should be collected by the trainer? From the trainer, what is the percentage of retainer fee that the association is going to get from the trainer? And depending on the number of residents who are going to get engaged with the trainer, what is the percentage that association is going to collect? So these are the terms of contract. So depending on that, the standard operating procedure needs to be defined for each activity of service that the association is rendering. So first and foremost important is that how it has to be done, what are the formalities that the executor of contract or the persons involved in the activity should carry out, and how that has to flow through the accounting and various control process so that internal control can be strictly adhered to. So this should be documented. That's what we call it as a standard operating procedure that has to be in place. The second foremost important is that formulation of accounting policy. Every association should have its own guidelines for accounting policies. Obviously, the accounting policies designed by the apartment association cannot be deviated from the generally accepted accounting practices. However, if the association is of the opinion that it requires some kind of customization, that has to be formulated. Say, for example, interest from certain funds, collection from certain funds, say sinking fund or corpus fund, will have to be treated in such a way that it should go to certain bank, that interest should be periodically withdrawn, or it has to be accumulated and should not be touched for a period of next 5 years. These are all the internal guidelines which each association has to adapt. So that has to be documented. That's what we call it as a policy. And accounting software, what kind of accounting software it's going to use? There are apartments who use only the manual system of bookkeeping even today, but there are apartments who are using various other software, say apartment Apna Complex or Adda, and various other softwares are available in the market. So they use those softwares, or are they going to use the traditional model of Tally? Tally is also an accounting software which can be used for bookkeeping purpose. And next, when it comes to the banking, which plays the key role, there are associations which use online banking, where maker checker is done by 2 authorized signatories. There are associations which even today follow the manual signature signing on the checks. So which is the best practice needs to be followed, needs to be customized. This is part 1 of bookkeeping. Second part is the accounting system. When it comes to accounting system, they have to decide. Majority of the apartments or resident welfare associations follow only the mercantile system of bookkeeping. And depending on the periodicity of billing, there are apartments who collect maintenance charges on a monthly basis, or on a quarterly basis, or on a half-yearly basis, or on an annual basis. So that needs to be followed consistently. And there are certain one-time collections, depending on the budget they project and then calculate it on a per square feet basis. That has to be set upfront before starting of the accounting system, implementation of the accounting system. Then comes the compliance management. What are the various related complaints? Say, for example, if you are doing it in Karnataka, we have to register it under whether shops and establishment or professional tax registration, or as an employer registration, as an employee registration. What are the registrations need to be taken? TAN needs to be applied. PAN has to be applied, of course, before opening the bank account. TAN is mandatory, and GST if required. So these are the basic registrations which the association has to take care. Next comes the chart of accounts. The chart of accounts has to be designed upfront so that the expenses are classified in the right manner. Next comes the segregation of duty. Depending on the number of size of the apartment or accounting team size, the segregation of duties needs to be clearly defined. Who has to get instructions from whom? Whether the estate manager is going to instruct the accounts division, or the accounts division has direct access from the main authority. So these are the internal checks and balances which needs to be designed before implementation of the accounting system. And the last but not the least is what is the management policy in terms of collection of cash and payment of cash. So beyond certain prescribed limit, the cash book should not have the balance. So these are all some of the important aspects and best practices which the Resident Welfare Association should follow. Then the third important aspect of accounting is that preparation of financial statement. ICA has issued guidelines note about 2 years ago, which needs to be followed by all non-profit entities. So the Resident Welfare Association, whether it is registered under Societies Registration Act, or it is registered under Apartment Ownership Act or Cooperative Societies Act, it needs to adhere to the template as prescribed and guided by the ICAI. So the preparation of financial statements needs to be in that format. Financial statement, I mean the receipts and payments, income and expenditure, and the balance sheet, along with notes to accounts and significant accounting policies. So these are some of the best accounting practices the association has to follow. Then when it comes to the chart of accounts, it is always better to have the chart of accounts designed upfront so that in future there are no new ledgers are created by the accounting team. Second reason is that association being carrying on only selected set of activities, there is no need for creation of new chart of accounts in the future times, so that the accountant need not struggle or need not create any new account head, that is head of accounts, so that it will not, at the time of auditing, it will not be difficult. Number two, the management is also very clear that how much of expenditure has been spent against the budgeted expenditure. So it's always advisable to have the chart of accounts set in the beginning of the year, so that the same thing can be carried out in the future years also. And also another reason it's important is that it becomes easier for comparison and analyzing the variances. So when it comes to chart of accounts, on the income side, one is the CAM charges, that is common area maintenance charges, which is an income. Second is the member income. Member income in the sense parking lot charges, party hall rental, move in and move out charges, notice board charges. These are the collections that the apartment collects from the members. When it comes to non-member income, stall charges, sponsorship fee, sale of scrap, these are some of the heads which can come under main head non-member income. And other income is basically the income earned out of fixed deposits or interest on savings bank account interest, and any dividend income if the apartment has invested its funds in the mutual funds or whatever it may be. So when it comes to expenses, there are clearly, we can bifurcate into 15 to 20 heads. So whatever the small expenditure can be classified under the broader headline, so that the comparatives becomes easier. So one such example is that security services, you call it as a facility management service. So security services, landscaping services, water supply, AMCs can be of various AMCs, gym equipment, lift AMC, and CCTV AMC, whatever it is, all AMCs can be put under one head. And building insurance also plays a vital role, because it's important to account the building insurance in such a way that the prepaid portion is captured correctly. And professional services, fuel expenses, these are some of the heads which I have given it for your reference. So it's very important for the accountant or RWA to set the chart of accounts in the beginning of the year. Next, let us focus on the records that needs to be maintained by RWA. When I say records, the first and foremost is the registration certificate. Because in my practical experience, I see that as the apartment becomes older, many of the apartment office bearers, they struggle even to confirm they are registered under which act, whether Societies Registration Act or Karnataka Apartment Owners Act, Ownership Act, or under Cooperative Society, whatever may be the act, they should be in a position to clearly tell under which act for which the registration becomes the basic document. So it's always preferable to store all the master document in one place, in a safe place, so that it can be used for future references. Bylaws of the RWA, members register. Members register is also very important, because the member in some of the states where, say, for example, in Maharashtra, where the subscription model is share capital through subscription is the model which is followed. So as and when the new member is inducted, they have to pay a one-time capital. So if that being the case, it is very important to have the members register. The member register needs to be updated on a yearly basis, so that the apartment has the RWA at any point of time has the details of latest update of its members. And also the audit report of 8 years minimum needs to be preserved by the management, so that in case of any queries or complaints, it is a responsibility of the RWA to submit the documents before any court of law. Then fixed deposit ledger along with the copies of fixed deposits. Many of the RWAs still follow only the physical format of fixed deposits. So it becomes very easier for auditors to verify, and also for the safety purposes, it has to be kept under a lock and key. Then election related records is also very important. What are the nominations which were submitted by the members for election, for contesting in the election? How many nomination forms were rejected? How many were withdrawn? And what was the election process followed? Who was the election officer? How the election was conducted? All these needs to be documented on a yearly basis and kept for any future reference, so that it acts as evidence in case of any disputes. Sinking fund register is also very important, because it is a one-time collection and it has to be used for the purpose for which it was planned. So using of sinking fund for any other purpose is not the correct practice. So it is very important for the RWA to keep track of how much of reserve sinking fund or corpus fund, you call it, was collected, and which year it was collected, against which asset, accumulation of acquiring of which asset it was used, needs to be properly tracked. And also it is important to have fixed asset register along with numbering of assets. It has to be sequentially numbered, and there should be a parallel register containing the year of purchase, the date of purchase, what is the depreciation, what is the WDV value as on date, along with the bills and pictures. It needs to be kept in a safe custody. And also there is something called as layout plan, which has the complete blueprint of the apartment, the entire unit, so that it becomes easier in case of any issues in finding out any kind of government authorities queries. So books of accounts needs to be kept as per the regulatory stipulations for a period of say 8 years. Income tax related records also to be kept in safe custody, because when we practically go for audit, we find that there are certain old disputes which are not attended to, for a simple reason that the accountant is not able to trace the intimation which had come to that year's concerned authorized person's email ID. So as a best practice, it's always better to have one common email ID. So whoever takes the role of that position will continue to use that email ID rather than using their personal email ID. Because when vital information goes to their personal email ID, for whatever reasons it gets deleted, and in case of not attending to those notices in a timely manner, causes a lot of repercussions to the RWA. So it's always good practice to have the email IDs under the custody of the person in charge of RWA, administrative in charge. So other statutory records also need to be kept in mind. Say when I say GST, all GSTR 1s, 3B are to be kept, downloaded and kept in the server of the RWA. Currently, what are the challenges as an auditor when we go for audit? These are the practical difficulties that we face when we do the audit of Resident Welfare Association. So the reason why I'm sharing it here is that it has to happen from both sides. When auditors come for audit, the accountant should make sure that they are up to the level which is produced, which is presentable for audit. And also it is the responsibility of the management to ensure that the accounts, books of accounts, and the audit goes through smoothly. So some of the challenges what we face is that the accounts are being internally managed. They are not able to, the person, whoever is in charge of accounts, is not able to spend adequate time on the bookkeeping. Because of that, there is always a delay, there is always a mismatch. There are apartments of size 300, 400, still they manage internally. Now, because of the online transfer, UPI transfer, when they are not able to trace which apartment has paid the dues against which month. So unless the reconciliation happens on receipts, it is very difficult to establish the closing balances of debtors. So that has to be systematized in the first place. So these are some of the problems we face. And accounting team, the person who's in charge of accounts, comes as a part-time accountant who does not have thorough knowledge on the accounts. So this also creates problems because of the increased complexity in terms of GST and other compliances. And there are apartments who use hybrid mode of accounting because the cash book is maintained by somebody and the banking transactions are handled by some other office bearer, say treasurer, and the president takes care of all payments. So it becomes so complex, integrating all the three in one place. So it's always better to have one accounting system, so that whether it is a manual payment or online receipt, everything puts in one place from day one, so that it becomes easier and it gives the very good picture of the accounting for the residents. Ultimately, the RWA and office bearers are working for the benefit of members, for the mutual benefit of members. So it's very important and important for the RWA to ensure that the books of accounts are maintained as per order. Then the next difficulty what we face is that reconciliation. The bank reconciliation does not match, or the cash book is not updated. The accountant or the person in charge of cash book always holds either more cash or less cash, in the sense the accounts are not updated on a day-to-day basis. So because of that, there is a mismatch, and they are not able to produce the records on time. Many of the times the bills are not collected, and it is always kept under suspense, a suspense account, parked in a suspense account, because they think that they can, in future date, they can get the confirmation, but that never happens. So these are some of the issues which we identify and encounter when we go for audit. And some other set of problems are that delayed compliance. So whenever they collect, deduct TDS, they do not remit it on or before 7th of every subsequent month, because of the simple reason that the treasurer is not his full-time job. He has his own employment to take care. So this becomes a side activity. When it becomes the secondary responsibility, it always takes a back seat. Because of that, we expect, there is always bound to be an error. I'm not saying that every time it happened, every apartment, those kind of delays happen. In some of the cases, we face these kind of issues. And any decision making takes longer time, because it's a group activity and all of them have to be in sync in whatever decision they take, and it has to be approved by the core committee. So because of that, decision taking takes a longer time, which ends up delays the process of accounting, finalization, and the audit. Some of the times what happens, the bylaws say something, whereas in reality, the bylaws and the practices followed by the RWA, there is a mismatch. So whatever decisions or practices that they adapt something new or change in practices, they have to ensure that it is in line with the bylaws. So the another problem what we face is that inconsistency in approach. In the sense, the new management takes over. First thing what they do is that they want to implement their ideas. So this innovation cannot happen in accounts or finance or in audit, because these are all very traditional areas and it has to follow certain guidelines. Whereas the management thinks that how they implement new project, creativity they bring in, similar systems they want to follow in accounting and the other practices also. Because of that, it creates some kind of disturbance when we go for audit. This leads to delayed reporting. Because of that, the AGM process also gets delayed. So these are some of the issues which we encounter when we go for audit. Having said that, these are the best practices and modern principle practices which we follow, which we seen and amazed by the practices that are implemented by few apartments, few RWAs in the city like Bangalore. One is the MIS report, where the income, they use the software. Using that software, they are able to give a pictorial representation of how much is the income, how much is deviated from the budget, and they are able to track the income and expenditure in a monthly basis, so that they are able to effectively manage the cash flow. The second is that they are publishing the unaudited cash flow statement to its members on a monthly basis. So it brings in a lot of transparency and trust for the residents. In turn, what happens if the trust goes up? Then there is a very healthy environment. Ultimately, it results in the appreciation in the price of the apartment. So every appreciation and value derives from the accounting and the auditing of the association RWAs. So some of the RWAs ensure that to maintain the integrity and transparency, to gain the trust of members, they realize that the accounts and audit needs to be given importance. So whereas there are few apartments which they neglect accounts and audit and tax laws and statutory compliances, obviously they end up losing their property value, and also they are not able to find even better tenants, and the quality of living drops ultimately. When it comes to publishing monthly cash flow to members, it creates a lot of satisfaction and transparency and faith in the key members who are taking lead in the RWA. And some of the apartments, if you say, they have backend, they have integrated with the accounting software. Accounting software is integrated with the payment gateway, so that the members are enabled to pay the CAM charges using their mobile app. So right from visitors entry to the payment, everything happens in one click, so that it becomes easier for them to make the payment. Second thing is that they also ensure that for any delay in payment will attract penalty. So it becomes easier for the apartments also to collect the interest for delayed payment, and members also becomes responsible enough to pay it on time. And as I said, budgeting also can be done through the software. And the one more important aspect which we have to appreciate is that it gives the alert for any dues. Once if RWA decides to collect the maintenance on a quarterly basis, as and when the due date approaches, the software automatically gives the notification for reminders. And there is a customer relationship management through which the CRM helps in collection of dues, and then payment and raising queries, grievances. Every amenities are handled end to end through CRM software. And also now the new practice, if you see, the voting also happens online, AGM also happens online. After the COVID, these are all the new inventions. And every meeting, even the monthly meetings, board meetings, everything happens through virtual mode, because the members who are the office bearers who are already holding the position into full-time employment somewhere, this becomes their secondary responsibility. And due to their business travel or official travel, it enables them to get connected and discharge their roles and responsibilities in a much better way than earlier. So these are the best practices, some of the best practices which are followed by the apartments in Bangalore. So thank you so much for your patient listening. you can reach out to me for any help in RWA. Thank you.